I'm very proud to sort of kick off this afternoon session with our acclaimed panel here today with me. I will structure the session in the following manner that everyone will introduce themselves shortly. We will have the panel questions being set, and afterwards give also the audience, you, a chance to ask questions at the very end. And yeah, I look forward to a session. Would you mind to start?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hi everyone. My name is Maher. I'm VP of Engineering at a company called Betterworks. We do performance management SaaS product for enterprise customers, and definitely in the last year and a half, we've been just on a journey to adopt generative AI features and kind of augment our product offering to just introduce AI. And in performance management, usually it's very human-centric, so we think about the managers, the employees, the leaders, the organizations, and AI has always been on the side. Like, we don't want to involve AI in this, but with the generative AI, it's really changing. So hopefully I'll get some time later to talk more about this and explain what we do and how we also address all these scalability, robustness, and safety issues.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Pratibha Rathore. I'm a tech lead at Meta within our enterprise AI org, and I have over a decade of experience in leveraging machine learning and AI in various domains such as legal and finance and trust and safety and enterprise security. And over the past 1 year, I've been heavily involved in architecting and implementing generative AI products to improve employee productivity. So if you are interested in talking about enterprise AI, I might have something to offer. So I'm really excited to be here to discuss and learn about what current capabilities of Gen AI is and what future holds for us.
Thank you. Cool. Hey everyone, my name is Mitesh. So I'm a tech lead for data and analytics at Airbnb. I have around 10 plus years of experience building data products, data engineering pipelines, supporting several different business verticals. So at Airbnb, I lead the trust and safety space, so mostly working with data which has fraud and risk factors in it. So working on building those models that can identify, detect, as well as mitigate the fraud on the platform, and most recently using AI to supplement the human efforts in fraud detection and prevention on the platform. And excited to talk to you all.
Thank you.
Hey guys, I'm Astha. I'm a director at Walmart, but I have over 10 years of industry experience in retail. I'm very heavily focused on AI and ML in the catalog space. Catalogs are massive for most players like DoorDash, the Walmarts of the world. How do you use AI, ML, Gen AI to make that experience for the customer seamless, work efficiently? They can get all of the information they want on the website. So a lot of catalog and AI work is what I'm going to talk about. Excited to be having this conversation.
Excellent. So you all bring a wealth of knowledge from your respective fields in terms of how to actually deploy AI, generative AI, make it safe, make it reliable, make it really scalable as well. What would you say is a key reason why this is so important? And further, maybe list an example from your day-to-day environment that would be helpful. Who would like to start?
Yeah, I can go first, and I can share at least my experience. I'm not in the space of building AI per se. I'm obviously on the edge of adopting and integrating AI into products. And I think the first thing you go through is building a proof of concept. You adopt or go with building the easiest, most kind of low-hanging fruit in here. And when it comes to experimenting with AI, it's obviously very costly. It has a lot of constraints in terms of latency and all of this. With all of the momentum with adopting generative AI and all the push from stakeholders and from the market and from customers, from an engineering perspective, you find these two kind of opposing sides. One is needing more generative AI integration. The other one is the complexity of adopting generative AI. Even OpenAI APIs has limitations and has cost and has things to consider over time. So it has been, again, a challenge, a journey to learn about all these things. Obviously, the other things I think the other panelists can cover in terms of safety and security, but at least for us was more about performance, cost, and robustness of the system.
Thank you.
I think when you think about any sort of generative AI model that you're going to deploy, right, there are two things to keep in mind. Is it internal? Are you using it within the company, or is it external? Are your customers using it? When it's internal, there is more leeway to making mistakes. When it's external, If you mess up, there are consequences, right? So it's really important when you think about external-facing Gen AI models. It could be something as simple as you want to have descriptions, right? Like your catalog has 50,000 items, everything from a papaya to a shampoo, and maybe some of them don't have descriptions, and you want to write out descriptions for them. But you need to be aware, anything that you use that is generated by AI, you're putting in front of the customer. So you need to have rigorous checks and balances about how do you make sure that something wrong doesn't go out. Right? So I think that is really, really important when you think about these models and when you think about them being customer-facing. Putting in rigorous checks and balances and not just trusting AI. An interesting example I give people is back when internet started, if you sent an email, you probably called up the other person and said, hey, I sent you an email, did you get it? You didn't just trust the fact that the email went through. AI, yes, it's great, but right now you need to do that verification and safety check. You can't just trust what's coming out of your models. So it's very similar to picking up the phone and checking the other person got the email. It's looking at the data that your model is producing to make sure that it's correct, and you can put it in front of your customers. That's been huge for us.
Thank you. And would you have some more concrete or tangible examples where you've come across an issue and you found a way of going about it, maybe?
Sure, yeah. So I think when I think about like how AI development is going currently, like we are all about building new stuff with Gen AI, trying to get our hands on it. But then I think we need to probably take a step back, think about, okay, what sort of output is the AI generating for us? Do we even have trust in what's getting generated? So a concrete example from my space would be around making decisions as to what is risky or what is fraudulent on the platform. So when you're making decisions in terms of figuring out who is a bad actor, who is a good actor in our platform, you need to be completely confident in terms of like the decision that your Gen AI is generating on your behalf. So having a reliable platform to figure out if the decision is 100% correct, you need to have like reliable and scalable platform to support it.
Great. And if we explore that risk realm a bit further, what would you say are like the top 3 mitigation strategies that instantly come to mind specifically for the LML world essentially out there?
Yeah, I think when you think about safety, you have to really make sure that you're thinking about safeguarding the outputs from the get-go. So safety, privacy should be part of the design from early on. And your definition of safety might be different from which use case you are catering to. So for instance, if you're using generative AI and the output, and the risk associated with that output is different if you're using it in like medical diagnosis versus if you're using it in a creative field where you just want to create a first draft of your requirements for a idea you had for a startup, it's less risky. So your risk associated with the output is different. So you have to really understand what does safety mean in the domain you are operating in. And so these are the things I would consider. And one of the things which is part of the LLM training is that it is probabilistic in nature, so it will not give correct output or the desired output all the time. So you have to really think, to have checks and balances, as Astha was saying. We all know the favorite term, hallucinations, right? Like the model might give output that might not be, as expected. So what do you do? What are the things that you can do to kind of mitigate those? RAGs, which is retrieval augmented generation systems, are popular, are some of the things that can ground your outputs to your own enterprise or your own proprietary information. You can also provide few short examples or in-context learning. I don't have to go detail. This is not a technical workshop, but like there are techniques that you can implement to make sure that your data is safer to be used and user can actually trust that output. I think on the governance side of the things, it is important to make sure that your, the Gen AI product that you're building is either SOC compliant or GDPR compliant or whichever geography you're operating in. It is definitely, making sure that it is privacy compliant when you're exposing it to the users. And the best practice, I would say, is when you're building your product, whether it's training or fine-tuning, document it, and share it with the users. That will build more trust and transparency with users if you're sharing what your product does and like how have you actually trained, fine-tuned, or build the user interface. So building that momentum and like that transparency with users is the key in building safe products.
Please.
Can I add one thing here? So I think the adoption to generative AI, as I think my co-panelists here shared, like you have leapway, you have like a wiggle room. If you're building this internally, if you're consuming this, I mean, even if you're exposing this to the end user, there is a little bit of like a space of learning and evolving and have a feedback loop. I am working in a space that is human-centric. Like we're trying to use generative AI for human relationships at the workplace, like management, building goals, giving feedback, having conversations. And also the business is a B2B. So this adds a lot of layers of complexity, constraints, compliances to go with. So as examples, we're using generative AI to remove bias from given feedback, to give more accurate feedback, actionable and measurable. So we don't want this generative AI layer to kind of do the opposite and be more harmful and create more toxic environment. So we're really doing all we can do using all these techniques and fine-tune and kind of build a model or improve the model in a way that will always deliver the expected behavior. Also on the B2B aspect of this, we are multi-tenant. So with one model or one aspect of a model, we're serving multiple customers. And it's very challenging to just use the same data or like serve the same behavior to multiple customers if this kind of model was trained or fine-tuned based on customer A data, it goes to customer B. So we're working on kind of isolating all of these, adding access control and kind of do fine-tuning in a different way than just using the data you collected so far. So again, generative AI adoption is tricky, and obviously we're learning a lot through this journey, but in constrained environment, they become even more complex, and we should all be aware of all these safety and robustness issues and challenges.
Thank you. I mean, all of you, unlike the panel we had earlier this morning, represent companies who have scaled, who are like successful, who are out there in the market, who are really changing and being known by people. So when we talk about scaling generative AI or LMM in your organizations, what would be maybe a surprising insight on that level? What would be like something that someone wouldn't expect? Of course, making your products better, faster, more efficient is a key thing, but what would be something where LMM has actually moved the needle into a whole new era for you to maybe even address new markets or another way of addressing the market?
Yeah, I think when I think of scaling a generative AI product is you have your user interaction or user interface layer, you have your model layer, you have your infrastructure layer, and you have AI chips layer. Most of the companies are not making, only few are making AI chips. So let's talk about the 3 upper layers. And I think infrastructure, everyone is saying compute is the new oil. So we have to really think about the ROI from the compute perspective. When you're scaling your models or when you're scaling your products, is it worth it? Is it worth the ROI that you're putting in? And are you really getting the best buck for your GPUs? I think that's key thing to consider when you are, I think initial prototyping and POC is good. You can always pay by token, but like when you scale, you have to really consider the infrastructure and compute cost. And that is the thing, from impact perspective, I think at Meta, we are a very impact-driven company. If it doesn't cut the bottom line, it's not going to be move forward. So we really think, in terms of the impact and the ROI that it generates. I work within enterprise AI, so we really monitor the employee productivity and then what are the tools that we can use to do that. So I think those are the things that I would consider in terms of your compute cost. Another thing is, your output quality and latencies. Like you build a great product, but it's slow, everybody expects immediate answers. So make sure that you have the solution in place which gives low latency. So think about those aspects as well as you scale your products.
Okay, please.
I think it's really important, right? Like what you're seeing with a lot of companies, and this is predominantly if you're a public company, your board is like, guys, what are we doing with Gen AI? What are you doing with AI? And you see companies go out and say, hey, these are the 5 things we're doing with AI. I think the companies who are doing AI really well A lot of them have a core strategy team, right, which has come together and they've laid out the roadmap. This is very new technology. This is very expensive technology, as Pratibha was saying, from a compute perspective. So how do you figure out, like, hey, these are low-hanging fruits. These just make sense. Here's where we need to put in models. Let's get them. It does not require a lot of compute power. Then you have mid-range projects, which are more expensive. They're more experimental in nature, but they can meaningfully move the needle. They might have a longer time horizon because you need to get the data in the right space. You have problems with how the data is formatted, all of those things. And then the third bucket, I like to call it, we have the PAG goals, which is the big, hairy, audacious goals. These are big, hairy, audacious models. These are models that are going to be transformational for the company, right? Like the entire inventory system for a company running on an AI model, which is very efficient. But those are painfully expensive. They take a lot of time to build. And your data is just so messy, right? A lot of these companies, even Amazon started in the late 90s. Their entire infrastructure and tech stack is at this point like 2.5 decades old, right? So your tech stack is that old and you're now bringing new technology. It's really hard from an integration perspective. So the way I think about it, it's those three buckets. You've got the quick wins, the low-hanging fruit. You go after those. Your midterm projects, which you hopefully see returns between 12 to 18 months, and your big, hairy, audacious model. Like that will move the needle, but that's very expensive.
Thank you. And if we look slightly outside in terms of collaboration opportunities, what would you say are the ones that have moved so far, historically speaking, you forward, where you have benefited from the community around you? And what are the ones that you may be wishing for and you would like to express to the audience here today?
Sure. I think collaboration in the Gen AI projects has been very pivotal, at least from my experience within our company. So it would typically happen that engineering or like the product would come up with a idea around like using Gen AI for certain use case, and they would start prototyping. Even like they would be at a point where they're happy with the initial results and they would go to like launch it, but then the time would come when we would have to review the product, like the product that you have built with the legal and the compliance, and they would say like there's no way you're going with this. So that's kind of like one issue I've seen with collaboration, because you're not bringing privacy, security, legal compliance in the same room from day one. So if you're not doing that, you're going to have like challenges down the line. So if you start collaborating from day one, thinking different perspectives, how every team, every org is thinking about using Gen AI, building Gen AI, and then the implication of Gen AI for your customers, for your internal product. So that's going to be important, like I guess, when I think of like having everyone in the same room from day one.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, I can add one thing. At Betterworks, for example, we have an AI council. So anyone as part of the company can be part of this council, sharing feedback, sharing thoughts. We also have a customer-based kind of council. So all our customers are welcome to contribute with thoughts and ideas about how to integrate generative AI or give feedback about the features we have been building so far. I think, again, for generative AI, everyone is a good source of like thoughts and feedback, but still like the decision will come to the product leadership and what we are building and what we're doing, prioritizing customer needs first. But the difference between features and work I have seen before versus generative AI, it's really driven by the customer needs and like people experiences versus top-down approach from executive leadership telling us like this is the vision, we need to go this way. It's a new space, it's moving really fast, and even the use cases are coming up every day. And for a space, as I said earlier, like that is really still focused on the human being. We're still centered around like people relationship. We need to be very careful so we don't go into these kind of environment where generative AI could be harmful or toxic.
That's a very important point to consider, and I think I'm going to make it slightly harder now. But you've just pointed out every day we're seeing essentially the race being beaten or won by someone else, and new innovations coming into the market. It's almost going to be impossible to answer this question in a meaningful way, but I'm still going to ask it. What do you think is going to be up next? What is going to be in 6 months' time, an innovation that you might be already looking forward to, or you expect to come, that would have a tremendous impact on your respective business?
I think this technology is, innovating at a breakneck speed. Today, if you think this is a state-of-art model, in a couple of months, you build something on the top of it, and then you realize that it's obsolete. So please make sure that you're adaptable. You have flexibility in mind and openness in mind that these things will evolve, and then whatever you're building, it is modular enough that you can plug and play newer model on your infrastructure in your design. I think that's exciting. And for me personally, open source is very exciting. A lot of companies are doing open source work. These large language models are trained and out there for you to just leverage. You don't have to pre-train, collect a lot of data. You just use, and Meta has done a lot of, it has open source Llama model. It's going to open source a bunch of new other models as well. I'm really excited about this open collaboration and a lot of AI small scale models as well that are available for everyone to use rather than them investing resource, and that speeds up a lot of AI development, not just for business and profit purposes, but also for social impact and betterment of humanity. So I'm really excited about what goes into the open source in future.
Wonderful. Please.
There are three things that come to mind. One, I think in the next 6 months, enterprise, again, and this is at the board level, right? Let's do AI, let's do AI. But when you talk to a lot of them and you ask them hey, are you doing this in-house? Are you partnering with the big LLMs? How are you doing it? There isn't a very clear answer. In the next 6 months, we'll sort of start to see that landscape clear out a lot more. We'll see more partnerships. And because of that, we'll start to see smaller models, which are more efficient and more focused on a particular use case. Because right now, a lot of these models are massive. And if you try and take the model and you apply it for a specific use case at a catalog level or for your call center management, that tech is good, but it isn't great, right? So I'm hoping in the next 6 months, there's a real pivot to small scale models, which work phenomenally well, similar to what Pratibha was saying. The second thing is just for the general average user, having multimodal models, right? Right now, to be able to take text, convert it into video, to get an output out of that, right? Being able to use video, photography, text, all of that interchangeably, that I think will happen in the next 6 months, and it'll be really good. The quality right now is not that great. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is generally, people are now beginning to use this, right? When ChatGPT came, everybody was using it. The number of users using it has gone down a little bit. I think I'm excited to bring that at an enterprise level, right? Where everyone in companies is using it to record meetings, to summarize notes. Because right now you're seeing a lot of people in traditional enterprise players who are not using it day to day. And I'm hoping that changes. Those would be the big three.
Wonderful. Going a bit forwards, so this morning we had also the panelists who came from the startup world give advice to future entrepreneurs. I would like to flip this question and say, here are a number of people who are already running established business to a certain degree. What would be a pitfall or key advice, if you only had one to give, that you would want to pass on to them?
I can go first very quickly. Again, I went through this journey with Betterworks, building generative AI features. I think the most important part of this is start as early as possible with a proof of concept. Start small, don't go and try to catch and use the most recent, the model that was out yesterday. I think at this stage, again, for generative AI adoption, it's not that important. What is more important is to have a use case, to have a product feature that is really leveraging the generative AI in the best way possible. That's going to move your business. That's going to be really impactful versus just building everything else. The other thing is, again, consideration for, this is what the session is all about, consideration for scale, security, and robustness. Don't overlook this and don't think, okay, I'm going to resolve this later. This can grow very quickly, very fast, and the requirements for infrastructure and cost and safety and security can grow very quickly. So make sure your vision is very clear and kind of know your North Star, but start really small.
Thank you.
I can go. Yeah,
please.
I think there was one video I watched last week around from Andrew Ng. He was talking about how there is a long tail of business transformation application of AI. Most of the AI applications have use cases are focused on the internet usage. We're not thinking beyond that. So, following up from what Maher said, we need to be learning and looking at different aspects. There are certain business, there is like the t-shirt business, there is like pizza business, or even the fashion business, where the applications of AI have not been explored. So probably, you could learn how that application could be taken. I think you're like the founder of one fashion company using AI. So I think those are some areas like we should be exploring and learning going forward.
One other advice, so sorry. It's not everyone will agree with this, but don't build a chatbot with generative AI unless you really have to. I think the users are really overwhelmed with chatbots today that are using generative AI. So really find a beautiful use case for your product that is just intuitive, in the flow of work, in the flow of the user experience. That is not just a pop-up and like, how can I help you? I think, again, generative AI is really good at that, but let's be more creative and build something that will really kind of move the needle for your business that is not just simply a chatbot.
Thank you. We now have the opportunity to ask questions from the audience. Please raise your hand if you have a question. We will have the mic come towards you. We'll come over.
Thanks to the panel, the insights which you have shared are very practical, very insightful. Continuing that theme along the practical lines, right? So we have leaders stumbling over themselves, right? Let's do something with generative AI. When are we implementing generative AI, or when are we building an AI product? But then you got to slow walk it. You got to temper that enthusiasm. In your experiences, how have you tempered that enthusiasm? When the leadership sky is falling, when they should have done something with AI yesterday, or the board is literally on their tail, or they're setting their tails on fire, how do you then set a method to the madness? How do you then temper the excitement and say, look, this is what we will be doing? Astha, you did point out a very good framework, like the low-hanging fruit, the medium-term goals, and the BHAGs. But what are some of the more practical things that you are doing day to day within your organizations to temper this excitement?
I can start with some examples of low-hanging fruit, right? I know Maher said don't do chatbots, but there are a couple of places where you can very easily leverage generative AI. First is marketing. If you have a marketing team and they're not using Gen AI tools, that's a huge miss, right? As an organization, there should be goals like our creative spend is going to drop by this % in the next 6 months because our talent is going to get upskilled. Between 6 and 12 months, we are going to show X% increase in productivity. 1 year plus, we can run a leaner team because we are more focused on using Gen AI, right? So marketing is a big one. Everyone has a chatbot. It is, you throw a stone, you can find one. But customer service is another area which is low-hanging fruit, right? So then being like, OK, we're going to focus on marketing. We're going to focus on customer service. The third is just internally, like Morgan Stanley recently trained and created an AI chatbot by training and taking 100,000 of their internal documents and putting it into this chatbot. And they're actually reducing the size of their incoming analyst class. Because now you can just ask this chatbot and it'll answer to you. And people have become more efficient, right? So there is low-hanging fruit. Start there. Once you have that, then define like, hey, what is your medium term and your big, hairy, audacious model? But that way you're showing quick wins. Like the board can then go and say, hey, our marketing team created this. Heinz, the ketchup brand, created an AI-generated marketing campaign, which was basically, we asked AI what ketchup would look like, and this is what it came up with. It generated a lot of interest in that brand, right? So you can go to the board and be like, here's where we used AI. They can go and talk to the street about it. So it start with low-hanging fruit while having a plan for medium and big, hairy, audacious.
I think I can add to that. Like, generative AI is the top of mind for every CEO, every CFO, every leader in most of the companies. So I hear you, what you're saying. Like, I'm part of Enterprise AI, and all our leadership last year was like, let's discover let's go deeper into every application and find out where we can leverage and like harness this technology, and like, let's be proactive. And so I understand where you're coming from. I think we had a period of time last year where we worked with our product managers and our application managers and our XFNs to really understand the use cases. So we were our mindset was let's explore where we can provide the advantages. So we were not thinking of the impact, or we were not thinking of like this is going to work well, but we wanted to explore the capabilities. What are the capabilities and what are the use cases that we can explore? So once we did that exercise for a couple of months, then we sat down and said, okay, these are the use cases, but what are the big bets now? And how do we quantify which big bets to work on? And that's where your leadership will definitely agree with. And how do you define those big bets? It could depend on what business matrix you follow. For us, within enterprise AI, we follow like more of the productivity goals. So we have our matrix, and then for each of the use cases, we define those matrix, quantified them, and then said, out of these 100 use cases, these are the 5 that we are going to focus on, and we'll make sure that we land it in the next year. So this is, you have to adapt and like change your mindset from like initial exploration, let's see where we can identify the use case, versus now we have identified, let's make sure that we have identified the big bets and like really put our resources, our manpower, all our technology there, rather than spreading ourselves thin. So that's my take on it.
I'm going to add one last thing here, grounded in use case that we experienced through Betterworks. So first of all, I think I heard this in the event, I think yesterday. Some people said, like, most of the time AI is not the vision for most companies, right? Like, except the ones that are really deeply into AI. It's a tool. So really make sure, like, as a global understanding within an organization, they understand it's a tool to empower and augment the product you have. But on the other hand, to just keep that momentum and respond to the executive leadership, their needs and their hunger for generative AI adoption, you need to really understand that generative AI is, again, goes from the easiest thing to the most complex thing. Start with the small ones. Build a vision, obviously, like you need to know and imagine your product 10 years from now, but start small. And what we did at Betterworks, we start with summarization, we start with rephrasing. We started with the things that we know generative AI has been proving to be very good at. I mean, obviously chatbot and like having an agent to talk to. And then we went into like, okay, building, really generating content that is relevant to the platform. And then even planning and like having a chain of thoughts and all of these. So you can really start small with things that you can have overnight with generative AI, especially if you use like a kind of managed services. And then over time, as you kind of flex this muscle, you serve your executive leadership team with what they need. As long as you have a vision, as long as they know more generative AI features are coming, they will be fine and happy, and your customers will be happy, hopefully.
Excellent. That's a really nice closing point. Thank you so much, all of you, for coming here today and sharing these insights. Big round of applause for our speakers.